Welcome back to Cess Talk Sports and the BeWise PoliSports Tea Time podcast, where sports, politics, race, and real talk all meet at the table, served hot and unfiltered. I'm your host and favorite auntie with Uncle Tendency Cess, and you already know I got my always down for the conversation and never gonna hold her tongue co-host with me, Political Lil. And today we giving the tea on one of the most dominant and disruptive figures in college athletics, Coach Dawn Staley. Dawn Staley has redefined the game, not just in the win column, but in the culture she's built, the barriers she shattered, and the legacy she continues to cement. Her presence on the sidelines has become a symbol of unapologetic Black excellence in a space that was never built to celebrate it. But the 2024-2025 season brought a different kind of energy. South Carolina, coming off an undefeated championship season, fell short in a repeat bid. Then came the twist. Columbia's own MiLaysia Fulwiley, the high-flying hometown phenom, hit the transfer portal. And just like that, the criticism got real loud. Folks start questioning Staley's system, saying it's stifled creativity, that it's boxed in Fulwiley's talent. But let's be clear, that kind of critique is soaked in coded language Black women in power know all too well. Because while Dawn was getting dissected, Geno Auriemma and UConn were getting celebrated. Paige Beckers leads a deep tourney run, and suddenly it's all tradition restored and a return of greatness. The media praise overflowing. The contrast loud. This ain't just about hoops. It's about comfort. It's about power. And it's about how America responds when a Black woman owns the moment versus when the old guard reclaims the throne. Critics can question Fulwiley's move. That's fair game. But framing it as a flaw in Staley's leadership, that's a reach. And it reveals way more about the bias in the room than it does about her blueprint. Because if we're keeping it a buck, when it's Geno, they call it structure. When it's Dawn, they call it restriction. And that's double standard. It's as old as the game itself, Lil.
That's right. We're talking about Gamecock's recent title run that came up short, the unexpected transfer of hometown star MiLaysia Fulwiley, and the not-so-subtle heat Coach Staley is catching because of it. And let's be clear, the shade ain't about basketball strategy. It's about power. It's about a Black woman leading, winning, and not apologizing for it. South Carolina's season didn't end in a championship repeat. But make no mistake, this team was still dominant. Still, the criticism is now laser focused. Fans and the media are whispering and sometimes screaming that Fulwiley left because she was stifled, that Coach Staley's system limited her star power. Now pause. Let's talk about who gets called out for having a structured system. Geno Auriemma just reclaimed the throne at UConn with Paige Beckers after a 9-year absence. But a white coach, white superstar, and everybody's calling it a Cinderella story. They got their fairy tale ending, and in a climate of white grievance and return to traditional politics, that imagery, it's hitting the spot for some folks. Like all's right with the world now that the old guard is back. But when Dawn Staley wins, dresses in Gucci, and builds a squad full of Black girl magic, suddenly she's too tough, too flashy, too controlling. So what we're really talking about here is discomfort America has with powerful Black women who don't shrink themselves to fit in a box. Fulwiley's exit is being used to critique not just coaching decisions, but Staley's entire identity. And let's not forget, Staley has built a dynasty. She sent players to the WNBA. She's mentoring. She's showing Black girls what's possible when you lead with excellence and don't bow down. Fulwiley leaving doesn't erase her legacy. It's part of a system where athletes transfer all the time now. But somehow when it's Staley, it becomes a referendum on her leadership. Let's be real. If a white male coach loses a player, it's part of the game. But if a Black woman, she's too much. She can't manage stars. That's a double standard. So today's tea is this. Black women in power don't just have to win. They have to win perfectly. And even then, they're one storyline away from being dragged. And guess what? Coach Staley ain't going nowhere. Her legacy is bigger than one season, one transfer, or one narrative. She's a disruptor, and disruptors shake up systems that weren't built for them to win.
Let's take a moment to talk about context. Because what we're watching right now with Dawn Staley is more than a reaction to a transfer or a title run. It's the redefining of what success is supposed to look like when a Black woman is at the top. Let's talk about something that's flying way too far under the radar. Corey Close just lost her entire freshman recruiting class at UCLA. And the silence is deafening. We're talking about one of the most highly touted groups in the country. Gone. All of them. And yet not a headline in sight. No questions, no think pieces, no media frenzy. Imagine if that happened to Dawn Staley. Imagine if a full class of 5-star talent dipped from South Carolina overnight. The takes would be flying. The critiques would be loud. They'd be questioning her leadership, her system, her locker room, her control. But Corey Close, quiet as kept. This is what media bias in women's sports looks like in real time. When a white coach loses her whole class, it's a non-story. But when a black woman loses one player, even after a championship run, the microscope comes out. The language shifts. The scrutiny multiplies. Let's be clear. Player movement happens. This new era of college hoops is fluid. But if we're going to talk about culture, retention, and leadership, let's talk about all of it. Keep that same energy for everybody. Because the selective silence around UCLA is louder than any hot take we've heard about the South Carolina situation. You see, when a white male coach like Geno Auriemma has talent like Paige Beckers, the pressure is about championships and stats. The conversation stays on the court. But with Dawn Staley, it's not just about wins. It's whether she made every player feel like a star, whether she smiled enough, whether she was too tough, too structured, too flashy. That ain't coaching critique. That's cultural policing.
Say that again, because if you look at it plainly, you'll see the double standards loud and clear. Geno's system has been the same for decades. Disciplined, rigid, UConn first. And no one ever says he held players back. They call it discipline. They call it legendary. But when Dawn Staley does it, it becomes restrictive. They act like she has to run a democracy in her locker room or she's failing. And let's be honest, how many top-tier male coaches are expected to be part mentor, part therapist, and part PR manager for every athlete's brand? That's the weight put on black women in leadership. The job is never just X and O's. It's optics, emotional labor, and grace under fire, even when no grace is given to them in return.
Facts. And to keep your stars happy narrative, that's a trap. Because it's never applied to the men the same way. Nick Saban don't get that. Geno Auriemma don't get that. But with Dawn Fulwiley leaving is somehow a sign of failure. Not just for the program, but for her as a black woman leading it. It's like people are waiting for any sign to say, see, she not built for this. That's how white supremacy shows up in the standards, in the shifting goalposts, in the silence when white men do the same thing and it's called business. But when a black woman enforces structure, she's seen as cold, controlling, or worse, ungrateful for the spotlight.
Exactly. The real issue, people don't know what to do with a black woman who doesn't need validation to lead. Dawn Staley didn't ask permission to build her program. She didn't shrink to make people comfortable. She made a system that works. And now that system is under fire. Not because it doesn't work, but because she created it. We're not just witnessing backlash. We're witnessing resistance to a woman who's disrupted the traditional mold. And that's why this moment matters, because it's not just about Fulwiley. It's about all black women watching, learning, and daring to lead their own way.
So let's keep this going and get into the meat of it. Player empowerment versus culture control. This era of college sports is brand new. These young athletes aren't just players anymore. They're entrepreneurs, influencers, brand ambassadors. And with NIL money in the transfer portal, they've got more power than ever. But here's the twist. When a white player uses that power, it's called business savvy. When a black athlete does it, especially under a black coach, it becomes a soap opera. Suddenly it's about dysfunction, unhappiness, locker room drama. Now let's be real. Who gets to own the narrative about why they leave or stay? That's where the race and power lines get real clear.
Loud and clear, because MiLaysia Fulwiley isn't just a baller. She's a brand. She has national buzz, NIL deals, a game people want to see. She moved how a lot of top prospects move these days. But the media already spinning this like she escaped from something, like she had to flee Dawn's system. It's not even about basketball anymore. It's about framing. And guess who's being framed as the villain? The black woman coach. Not the system, not the game, not even the pressure of being a hometown hero. It's all on Staley. And that's dangerous because it paints a picture that any move by a young black player as a rejection of black leadership rather than just a career decision.
Exactly. It's almost like black women can't win either way. If they discipline players, they're controlling. If they give players space, they're losing control. If they keep top talent, they're hoarding stars. If these stars leave, they can't manage egos. The conversation is never neutral. It's coded. And what's wild is this era should be the most liberating time for both coaches and players. Black women are finally running programs. Players are finally getting paid. But instead of letting that power flourish, folks are trying to reassert old hierarchies through media narratives, fan backlash, and coded critique.
And let's be honest, this is the fear of what it looks like when a Black woman builds a system of excellence and young Black athletes thrive within them. That's too much power for some folks to process. So they fracture the story. They pit players against coach. They make it seem like success can't happen when the whole thing is unapologetically Black. So the real question is this: who gets to tell the story? Because Fulwiley's story shouldn't become an attack on Staley, and Staley's legacy shouldn't be rewritten over one transfer. But that's what happens when power is disrupted. Those who never had to explain themselves suddenly want answers from everyone else.
And we ain't playing that game. What we're seeing is two truths at once. Players deserve freedom, and Black women coaches deserve respect. Fulwiley's move is her right, but it doesn't mean her coach failed her. It doesn't mean the program is broken. It means the landscape is shifting, and we better be smart about how we read the moves.
Because when power dynamics shift, the first thing folks do is try to control the narrative. But this time, we're telling our own story, loudly, clearly, and in full context.
All right, so let's get into it. Because this right here is where the mask slips. When you line up the media narrative side by side, the way Paige Beckers gets praised versus MiLaysia Fulwiley gets picked apart, it exposes the game beyond the game. And let's be clear, this ain't about hating on Paige. She's cold. She's talented. She's one of the best to do it. This platform been gave her flowers and still will. But what we're not going to do is pretend the coverage is balanced. Because what Paige gets from the media, that's not just hype. It's a full-on media coronation. She's a comeback queen, the face of the future, the savior of the game. Every highlight gets mythologized. Every return is treated like a cinematic moment. Even her injuries become part of a bigger destiny arc. Meanwhile, when MiLaysia made a personal decision to transfer, the narrative flipped. Now it's attitude, conflict, ego. No context, no understanding, just scrutiny. That's not a coincidence. It's a reflection of who the media is comfortable celebrating without limits and who always has to justify their brilliance.
Yes, and meanwhile, Fulwiley, who brought razzle, dazzle, poise, and numbers to South Carolina, is getting the cold shoulder now that she's made a personal career move. Suddenly, her brilliance is being overshadowed by whispers of ego, entitlement, and system conflict. She went from highlight reels to headlines about drama. But let's be honest, this isn't about basketball. It's about comfort. The media is far more comfortable with a white guard leading a legacy program under a white male coach because that feels like tradition. That feels like order. And when a young Black woman thrives under the guidance of a Black woman leader and then decides to pivot, that shakes the table. That makes people uncomfortable.
Let's call it what it is. Paige Beckers has been gifted the archetype of the wholesome, humble heroine. She fits the media's idea of what leadership should look like. Quiet confidence, mainstream appeal, coached by a man who's a media darling. It's all perfectly packaged. Meanwhile, Fulwiley is magic in motion, flashy, fearless, from Columbia, coached by a Black woman with a championship pedigree. But instead of uplifting that narrative, the press turned it into a morality tale about why she left, as if she owed the public an explanation, as if young Black athletes can't just make moves without being labeled a problem.
And that's the gag. Nobody asked Paige to explain why she stayed. Nobody probed how Geno built a system around her, because that type of leadership, male, white, dominant, is treated as the gold standard. It's never questioned. But the moment a Black woman has the same success, the microscope gets hot, and every move made around her becomes a potential indictment. What does that tell us? That mainstream media isn't neutral. It's curating comfort for white dominance in sports, whether that's in leadership or in stardom. And when the faces start changing, the narratives get tighter, more suspicious, more coded.
Exactly. This is why framing matters. Because sports media doesn't just report on the game, it shapes how the public sees the players, the coaches, the program. Paige gets legacy coverage. Fulwiley gets legacy interrogated. It's the same court, but a different set of rules. And unless we challenge with that framing, unless we call it out in real time, we allow it to go unchecked. This is bigger than just two players. It's about who gets the benefit of the doubt, who gets to lead without being questioned, who gets to be brilliant without having to apologize for it.
And who gets to fail gracefully too. Because let's be honest, if Paige had transferred or flopped, the headlines would have still been solved. But for Fulwiley and Staley, there's no room for error, no room for growth, no room for nuance. And that's why we're here, to give the game the full story, not just one the media is comfortable telling.
Now let's talk about what folks are conveniently forgetting. MiLaysia Fulwiley didn't come into college ready-made. She evolved, and a big part of that growth happened under Coach Dawn Staley. Let's not act like that didn't happen. People are so caught up in her leaving that they're erasing the reality of her development. That girl leveled up in South Carolina. She got national exposure. She competed under the brightest lights. She was in a program that demanded excellence, discipline, and poise under pressure, and she rose to the moment. That's development. That's coaching. That's growth. But in this media spin cycle, people are acting like she was stifled, or worse, mismanaged. Like Staley's system was some oppressive force instead of the championship culture it's been proven to be. Come on now, don't rewrite this history just because the story took a turn.
Exactly. Development is not ownership. Coaching is not control. And transferring is not betrayal. Player movement is a built-in part of the new college sports era. It doesn't mean something went wrong. Sometimes it means a player just is making a strategic decision based on style of play, exposure, NIL potential, or future pro fit. Let's keep it real. MiLaysia came into South Carolina as a hometown hero. She walks away with experience, growth, highlights, and a better understanding of the game at an elite level. That's success. That's what college basketball is supposed to be about. And yet here we are watching folks treat this like it's some cautionary tale, like either Staley failed her or Fulwiley loyalty is in question. Neither of those things are true. What's true is that two Black women navigated this system with power, grace, and business savvy. And the system ain't used to seeing that.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it a buck. When white athletes transfer, it's all support and soft landings. She's doing what's best for her. She's just finding the right fit. But let a Black woman make the same move. Suddenly it's a headline. Suddenly it's drama, ego, attitude, conflict. That double standard stays loud. So let's reframe the whole conversation, because this ain't just about Fulwiley. This is about every young Black athlete coming up behind her. They need to see the truth. It's okay to grow when you plant it and still choose to bloom somewhere else. That's not failure. That's elevation. That's power. And instead of criticizing that evolution, we should be celebrating it. Every time a Black woman chooses her path, her peace, her purpose, that's not a story of loss. That's a story of becoming.
And we need to protect the legacy of coaches like Dawn Staley while we're at it, because she poured into that young lady, gave her a platform, challenged her, developed her. That legacy doesn't disappear just because the next chapter starts somewhere else. Fulwiley is a product of Black excellence, Black coaching, and Black vision. Let's stop acting like movement means malfunction. It's just momentum. And we've got to be grown enough in our analysis to hold all that truth at once.
Before we close this thing out, let's pull back and look at the bigger picture. Because this moment, Fulwiley entering the transfer portal, South Carolina not repeating, it ain't the whole story. In fact, it's barely a chapter in what Coach Dawn Staley is building. What we're witnessing is a woman crafting legacy in real time. Her impact is not just about banners and trophies, though she's got plenty of them. It's cultural, it's generational. She's raising up a lineage of women, players, coaches, leaders who are going to reshape the landscape of basketball long after she hangs up that whistle. Staley isn't just running a basketball program, she's building a movement. And like any true disruptor, she's shifting the blueprint for what leadership looks like. Unapologetically Black, community rooted, emotionally intelligent, and fiercely competitive. You don't see that every day because the systems was never designed to let that type of leadership thrive.
Say that, because let's be honest, there are plenty of coaches with rings, but how many of them can say they're building a community wealth while they win? Staley invested all her player futures. She teaches them how to own their own power, use their voices, their platform. She shows them that success is more than what happens between the lines. Look at how she's walking through partnerships, Aflac, Bulls, Under Armour, not just collecting checks, but shifting power. She wears Black designers, supports HBCUs, and uplifts local businesses. She's teaching young Black women to be whole, not just hoopers. And that's why the system is pushing back now. That's why the critiques are suddenly louder, harsher, because power that doesn't come from the usual places makes people uncomfortable, especially when that power is held by a Black woman with receipts and reach.
And this ain't about just one season or one player's decision. This is about a standard of leadership that's rooted in accountability and love. And it's shaking up the whole sport. You don't have to agree with every call she makes, but you can't deny what she's created: a pipeline, a presence, and a promise for what's possible when we lead on our own terms. We've got to start judging legacy on more than just whether a team cut down the nets in April. Did the coach send women out into the world more confident, more empowered? Did she create space for others to rise? If the answer is yes, then that's that legacy work.
Come on, Auntie. And I'll say this too. Staley influence goes way beyond the Gamecocks. She's mentoring other Black coaches, collaborating with leaders in media and business, and opening doors where they were wielded shut. That's not just coaching, that's cultural disruption. So while folks are fixated on the scoreboards and the stat sheet, we're here to remind them true greatness echoes beyond the box score. Dawn Staley is playing a long game, and the game will never be the same.
Let's wrap this up with some truth that might make some folks uncomfortable. Because what's happening with the scrutiny around Coach Dawn Staley? This ain't about basketball. This is about control. Angela Davis said it best. When Black women win, it challenges the system. And let's be clear, Staley has been winning big, not just with banners and trophies, but by building something powerful, rooted in purpose, and unapologetically Black. The pressure she's facing right now, that's not a stumble. That's the system trying to remind her of the rules, trying to put her back in the box, trying to make her shrink. But here's the thing, Dawn Staley don't shrink, she expands, she levels up, she brings others with her, she multiplies her reach, her impact, her influence, and that's what really has them shook. Because a confident, successful, cultural-driven Black woman sitting at the top of the game, that ain't just a coach, that's a whole threat to the status quo. They can't control it, they can't copy it, they can't stop it. So let the noise get louder, because that's how you know she's shifting something real.
Auntie says you preaching right there. Because if we look at the moment clearly, it's not a critique of one coach's season. It's a correction attempt. The powers that be are watching a Black woman define excellence on her own terms. And instead of celebrating that, they're reaching for the same old narratives. She's losing control. Her system doesn't work. The players are unhappy. But let's flip that lens. When UConn wins under Geno Auriemma, it's called dynasty. When South Carolina wins under Staley, it's questioned. When Paige Becker shines, it's a triumph of leadership. When Fulwiley transfers, it's a scandal. Why? Because whiteness in power is seen as normal, and Blackness in power is always interrogated. We got to call that out, because if we don't, the system keeps rewriting our stories in real time. What Dawn Staley is facing right now is not failure. It's resistance to her success. And that resistance, that's proof that she's changing the game.
And let's be real loud for the folks in the cheap seats. Don't confuse the noise with a lack of impact. All that chatter, that's the sound of system shaking. That ain't doubt, that's confirmation. Confirmation that Coach Staley's blueprint ain't just working, it's threatening everything they thought was untouchable. Her leadership, her presence, her entire model is carving out space that was never meant for her or for the ones coming after her. And the fact that she's still standing at the top, that ain't no fluke. That's a problem for the status quo. So now we don't fall back, we double down. We celebrate the wins and the pushback, because every time a Black woman leads and wins on her terms, it doesn't change basketball. It changes the narrative. It changes what's possible. It sets the next generation free.
And that's a mic drop, Auntie, because the truth is, Dawn Staley doesn't need anyone's permission to be great. She is great. And when they come for her, all that tells us is that her presence is powerful enough to provoke the system. That's legacy, that's disruption, and that's exactly why we ride for her.
All right, fam, let's bring this one home. We've been deep in the mix today, and if you were paying attention, here's what really came to light. First, we pulled the curtain back on the double standards Black women in leadership face. Coach Dawn Staley isn't just expected to win championships, she's expected to manage egos, carry the culture, and somehow keep every star happy while doing it. That expectation, it don't exist for most male coaches. Then we broke down the media bias, the way Paige Beckers gets crowned America's sweetheart, while MiLaysia Fulwiley's exit gets framed as a failure of leadership. The conflict with whiteness in power, clear. The discomfort with Black women running the table, even clearer. We spoke truth on player development too. Because let's not get it twisted. Fulwiley leveled up under Staley. Her transfer don't erase the growth. It's a new era. Players move. That's the game now. But let's not weaponize it to rewrite the story. We zoomed out and lifted up the bigger picture, because Dawn's impact goes way deeper than basketball. She's building infrastructure for Black women. She's growing leadership. She's teaching power, ownership, and what it looks like to win on your own terms. And we close it all with the realest truth. As Angela Davis said, when black women win, it challenges the system. What Staley is facing ain't failure, it's resistance. A system trying to push back because she's doing what was never supposed to be done. But guess what? She's already won. One player, one season, one generation at a time. This episode made one thing loud and clear. Coach Dawn Staley isn't just coaching the team, she's reshaping the blueprint. Her legacy ain't up for debate. It's locked in, period. And if you rocking with this combo, keep it going. Tap in on socials, drop a comment, and let us know. Is the framing around Staley fair or foul? How do you feel about player movement in today's game versus the past? What stories aren't being told, and who benefits from that silence? Next time, we're diving into a convo just as spicy, race, power, and NIL. How black athletes are navigating the new money game. With big brands circling and pressure rising, what does it really look like to thrive in this new era? Because remember, sports were never just about the game. It's always about the stories we tell, the truths we uncover, and the systems we challenge. Until next time, y'all keep that kettle hot, keep your voice louder, and never forget, when we speak, we shift the culture. This has been the Cess Talk Sports BeWise PoliSports Tea Time with Political Lil and the whole squad. We out.